Hey everybody, welcome back to PODcakes. I am so happy you're here. Today is the first episode in the series called The Current View, and we have got a lot to unpack, in this episode. This episode, we are going to be covering things that are happening in the Red Sea, the Suez Canal, the Houthis shooting the missiles, the U.S. Navy protecting those ships. We're going to be talking about Yemen. We're also going to be talking about the Panama Canal and the crisis with the drought that's going over there and not allowing some shipping coming through, and how all of this is correlating with a very potential global economic event. We're going to see where this takes us. We have a resource guide down below with all the links that we prepared for this show. Go down, fact check us. Maybe this will inspire you to engage in your own curiosities and do your own research and come up to your own conclusions on other things. This was filmed on February 13th at 4:30 p.m. 2024. So things may have changed by the time you listen to this. I can't think of a better person to come on and talk about current events with the Red Sea and the Houthis and shooting missiles, and my boy Sean with ADV Oregon. Talk about all things Navy, war-related, how the U.S. Navy is protecting some of the shipping going on in the Red Sea from the Houthis shooting their missiles. Dude, there is a lot to unpack here. Friends, if you like what we're doing here on PODcakes, please take a moment to consider helping us through our Patreon page. Every dime that we earn through that page goes directly into updating this channel, creating better content with better equipment, so on and so on, and it is greatly appreciated. If you're watching this on the YouTubes, just go down, like, subscribe, share, leave us a comment, even if it's just that one word. It really means a lot to us, and it's helping this channel grow to a new audience base that we haven't been able to reach yet, and I really appreciate that. If you're on Spotify or if you're listening to this on the Apple Podcasts, do the same thing. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, go down, leave us a comment, just tell us what you thought of this episode, and I hope that you learned something. This is engaging for you, and we hope to do more of these style of episodes coming up. So friends, here is the current view. Well, we've got a lot to unpack today, I think. Absolutely. We've got probably the best person that I know to come in and talk about shipping and military strategy, especially when it comes to the Navy. We got ADV Oregon, otherwise known as Sean, with us today. And Sean, why don't you give a quick synopsis of your background, being in the Navy and maybe your job, so people who don't know who you are can actually be like, oh, okay, this guy actually does know a little bit what he's talking about here.
You mean I can't just pretend?
Well, I mean, you can, but yeah.
Well, I spent 10 years in the Navy. My focus was electronic warfare and missile defense of ships. And then I moved into the IT world, dealing with computers now, but the company I work for does a lot of shipping and freight related things. So I follow what's going on from that standpoint. In the logistics side, just as a veteran, I follow what's going on the military side around the world. I can't go fight the wars anymore, but I try to keep up and be knowledgeable. I don't want to be an armchair quarterback and not really know what I'm talking about. So I try to keep up with things.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, with what's going on in this conversation that you and I are about to have, we're going to start with the Red Sea and the Suez Canal. And so your, missile defense and your knowledge of the warfare, I mean, that's what you did.
Exactly. So we know about what's going on. So before we get too far into, kind of maybe the repercussions, the possible repercussions of what's going on in the shipping over there, why don't we talk a little bit about the Houthis and exactly what's going on? Because as we're recording this on February 13th, and it is 4:53 in the afternoon, things can change. Things might change by the time we're done recording this, and definitely things will change between now and when this comes out next week. So, if we kind of just go on and give a brief synopsis, because really, when all this started going down, I was a little unsure of what, why, I had those questions. And that's what really drove, this kind of a podcast into fruition, if you will. And I really respect your knowledge base, on this topic. And I just have questions, and that's exactly what I want to do. Is I just kind of want to know more, a little bit, why all of this is happening. I know this is that whole region of the world, the whole Middle East. That's, for a lack of a better explanation, I think it's really bad as us as humans that we allow one group of people that read one book and another group of people that read another book, and we hate each other because of that. And I think that's the really disheartening part about this. But there are extremists on both sides, mm-hmm. and that's exactly what's going on right now with a particular group. So with that being said, they started the Houthis off Yemen, and you've been to Yemen, and tell me a little bit about that region and what you know about this particular group that's deciding to shoot missiles and try to mess up international commerce, essentially.
Sure, and I think first, kind of to set the stage, I think the goal of this podcast is informative and to not pick a side politically. Now, granted, I have some biases, as a U.S. veteran, but I think what we're trying to do here is just lay out the facts, and really, this current event started when Hamas attacked Israel,
right,
in late October, and then we saw the Houthis down in Yemen start essentially shooting at ships that were Israeli based, or that's they claimed were Israeli based. Late November, early December, and when you take a look at Yemen, what's going on there, they've been in the middle of a civil war for many years,
right?
And there's essentially two governments. There's a internationally recognized government of Yemen, and then there are the Houthis, and they each control about half of the country. And my personal experience, I have not been on the ground in Yemen, but I've been on the coast transiting on a Navy ship, is at that time there was so much instability, and this was 98 to 2000.
So pre-USS Cole.
Pre-USS Cole, yeah. We essentially looked at Yemen as an unknown threat. In other words, the government inland doesn't have control of their shoreline, and there are terrorists that could have missiles that could shoot us. And so, we increased our weapons postures on the ship. And what that is our ability to defend ourselves in a very rapid moment versus, it takes us 5 or 10 minutes. Could we defend ourselves in the next 30 seconds type of a thing? And we raised those conditions on the ship. We closed lower watertight hatches, again, in case we got hit, we would be able to survive. And that was the experience going by Yemen. There's a choke point. As you come out of the Persian Gulf, you come into the Indian Ocean. We actually got to stop in the Indian Ocean and have a swim call where we jumped off the side of the ship. And I think it was about 6,000 feet deep of water, and jumped off the ship. And
dude, so shallow.
Yeah, right?
Yeah. And isn't that where somebody saw something coming up? from underneath, or was that another one?
No, that was off the coast of Bermuda.
Oh,
Where the tuna were coming
yeah,
from the depths up, and
freaked
it scared
everybody out.
everybody out. Yeah, but no, we got a swim call in the Indian Ocean, and then you transit in through the Bab el Mandeb Strait. It's about I think 18 miles across, but navigable, or where large ships go, it's probably 4 or 5 miles across, so you could easily see each other. They have what's called a traffic separation pattern. It's essentially like lanes on a freeway, and northbound goes in this part of the map, and southbound goes in this part of the map, and you're restricted in those areas by depth. Also, when you're a 50, 100,000 ton tanker ship with one rudder and one propeller, your ability to stop can take miles. And so that's why they keep ships in these patterns through there. And then heading up into the Red Sea, and then there's an anchorage at the bottom of the Suez Canal where everybody waits their turn to get in there. So that's kind of my experience from being there and seeing where we were, over 20 years ago.
Yeah. And then you were talking about, the Houthis versus the internationally known, or recognized rather, government there in Yemen. So when you're looking at a map, and you're looking down at the Red Sea, basically from what I've noticed and seen, the Houthis control the coastal part. And that's really where we're running into a lot of the issues, because Yemen's behind them and they can't really do anything to help stop, coastal missiles or wherever they're shooting the missiles from.
Right.
And wherever they're getting them, that's a whole different conversation. But as of right now, I don't have a number on how many have been shot, how many drones have been going over, what the U.S. has shot down. Because I know at some point we were basically brought in to escort U.S. flagships.
There was some discussion of escorting, but it never actually took place. So an escort would look something like the movie Greyhound in World War II, and the Battle of the Atlantic, where we were literally escorting, kind of like a police escort, where you're putting a ship or a motorcycle or a police car in front of a group and behind the group. That's an escort, and that's not occurring. What we ended up doing was more like picket ships, where we're creating kind of a fence line. So we're staying to the east of the shipping lanes along the coast to essentially take the hit before the merchant ships.
Okay.
And so that's what we've done right now. And really for the last 2 months, really, is on average, there's been 4 to 5 U.S. destroyers there that are kind of hanging out in that middle ground between. And I think that's part of the discussion that's really important for people to think about is, as the majority of the people that watch this will be U.S. citizens, and there will be a lot of Canadian citizens. We both have strong navies that are allies.
Yeah.
And I think the discussion should be around what's our role in policing the world's oceans.
I think that's a very good question, actually. And that's a whole broader conversation to have. I think with this in the canal part, through the Suez and into the Red Sea, it's really what's happening. So maybe you can talk about a little bit if something's fired, because that's your job. So when the Houthis fire something over, what are the actions being taken, and then we'll kind of move into a bit of the commerce side.
Sure.
Maybe some of the tactics, maybe the container ships are taking, and the longer time it's taking to get anywhere, and then the impact what that's looking like.
Yeah, sounds good. And I think that there is a really good discussion to have, and make sure I stay on point here with the merchant ships and how they interact with the naval vessels for their protection. That's something that's really coming to the forefront in the last month. But in general, U.S. Navy ships have multiple layers of defense systems. So they have missiles that will fly out of the ship, out of a missile silo, and they can go, 100, 200 miles and shoot down aircraft or other inbound missiles. If they miss, then there are shorter missiles. So there's several variations of missiles. So some, may go 10 miles, some may go 80 miles, some will go 150. And obviously costs are associated with each.
Oh, of course.
And so the systems are capable of kind of determining the best missile for that situation. And then there's electronic warfare, and what I was involved with, and that's called soft kill. And so it's essentially jamming. And we are confusing or defeating an inbound missile with electronic measures. The good part about that is you're essentially limitless. As long as you have electricity on the ship, you're not going to run out of the ability to continue that fight, where missiles, you only have a finite amount, and then you have to pull out of the fight and go somewhere and reload, just like a gun.
Right.
And then the last ditch effort, and many people have seen it, it's called CWIS, and it's like an R2-D2 looking machine, and there's usually one or two on each end of the ship, and it has a 20 millimeter Gatling gun that shoots up to 4,500 rounds a minute. And
man,
that's the last ditch effort. The way we were taught about those systems was that essentially the ship could be sinking, but if there's power to it and bullets in it, it can keep fighting on its own. And it can track its own bullets in flight, so it can zero in on somebody.
Oh, geez.
So it can correct itself.
Right. Yeah.
So you have those different layers, and then and that's within a ship. But the really all of the U.S. Navy and many of our allies now can connect our systems, and so I could be looking at a screen of data information that my ship and its sensors can't even reach, but it's because we've hopscotched 2, 3, 4 ships down the line, and I can see that entire picture.
Okay, yeah.
And so that's really important. And right now there's an aircraft carrier over there. The aircraft carrier has its own version of an AWACS.
Yeah.
So that's flying really high up there, and it's probably one of the best early warning systems for this type of thing, and it's tracking, what's coming out of Yemen. I'm sure there are combat air patrols, so things like F-18s that are loaded up with air defense missiles that are also capable. And those missiles are probably a lot cheaper than what the ships are shooting.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that's actually pretty fascinating that you can kind of just repeat down all, using each ship as a repeater to get a wider view, and definitely those AWACS, if anybody knows anything about the Navy, I mean, you see those part of the battle group. I think that's pretty fascinating.
Yeah, usually
the way all the logistics and how all the different ships and everything are help supporting one another, and especially like the big aircraft carrier and the subs and everything that is there right now. So not really sure the Houthis thought we'd be showing up flexing like that, but here we are.
Yeah, and that's one of the tricky conversations about this, though, is if we're shooting a $2 million missile at a $4,500 drone, is that cost effective? Now, some would also say, though, that the ship that it hits may be worth $500 million. Then that's the measurement we should be.
Is that the measurement we should be going by, or should it be going by human life? Right.
Right. Well, in that too.
In my opinion, that's more valuable than, because everything on the ships, let's face it, that's insured, right? But the guys that are aboard, so if we shoot down a $4,500 drone, that's money well spent to me.
Right.
I mean, it's going to go somewhere, whether it goes, to Ukraine or Israel. I mean, that money's going to get spent somewhere.
You're right.
So we might as well keep loading those bad boys up, right?
Yeah. And I think one of the other things from the naval perspective is this is really one of the first times in history where our ships have been so close to the front line in a defensive measure in decades. We've had the war in Iraq, the war in Afghanistan. there were threats to the ships, but not to the level that we're shooting down missiles now. In some engagements, they may shoot down 5, 10, 15 missiles in the course of one battle.
Right.
That's unheard of. Those are completely new things. Clearly, the U.S. Navy was prepared for it through technology and build out over the last 20, 30 years. But it's also a milestone, I think. And also, one of the types of missiles that they're firing are ballistic missiles. And essentially all a ballistic missile is something that's going very high and then comes straight back down. And most missiles up until now that were threats to ships were sea skimming, or, they may fly 50 feet off the water, 200-300 feet off the water. But we didn't have these things flying massive elevations and then dropping straight down. And fortunately, our systems have evolved in preparation for that. But the first anti-ship missile shot occurred during this time. Like, it just happened.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
That's okay. See, learning new stuff already. So, excuse me. So now we got the missile systems in place. We have the Navy in place, and kind of talking about that. Now let's talk about a little bit of what's going on with the actual commerce ships.
Yeah.
Or the containers and everything, because I know it's kind of twofold, right? So now we have actually maybe even threefold. So we got a bit of a bottleneck of ships who are, as far as what I've read, has been debating going through there, waiting to go through there, or turning around. And I forget how much longer these ships take to go around to get to where they're going.
Well, I have some cheat sheets, so I actually made
that.
some notes. So, and that's an important key. To take a step back before we go there, though, you have to understand that both the Panama Canal in the Americas and the Suez Canal are, the amount of trade that goes through them is probably 80 to 90% of freight.
Yeah.
International
global freight.
That goes by ocean.
Right.
And so literally right now at this, and in general, one issue is okay because there's other ways around it. But right now, when your two biggest choke points are having major problems, that's what's causing a real concern here. And in particular, the Suez Canal, you come up through into the Red Sea. The Suez Canal is your shortcut to the Mediterranean.
Right.
And so that's the primary freight route for goods from China and East Asia to get to Europe.
Mm-hmm.
It's not necessarily the route just to America. In fact, the delay of American freight is far less. But if you're going from China to Rotterdam, which is a major freight port in Europe, it's an additional 10 days from China,
right.
But it's 30%. And I think looking at it from the percentage side is, that's fuel, that's labor costs, the people on the ship. But more importantly, beyond that, it's how many routes a year can that ship run? So if that ship can do 5 full round trips a year in a normal year, it may be able to do 4. After you cut down 5 ships, you're going to need another ship to pick up that same capacity.
Right. Yeah. And that's exactly what we're seeing. We're not seeing the increase in the shipping market. And I think maybe tagging on to that is a bit of like a video you sent me like 2-3 weeks ago or whatever on hazard pay for the crews. And so it kind of, to me, it also sounds like maybe the crews are like, no, I don't want to go on that boat to go over there because we're not. And I think whether that's right or wrong, it still would play a part on the functionality of that ship.
True.
And where it can go, right? So if you don't have the full crew, that could be also trickling down a whole different avenue, but
yeah,
still would definitely play a part or a role in slowing things down. As you just said, 10 days, and that's exactly what I got up to, 10 days, and it could affect to increase everything by 15%.
Yeah. Yeah, and the other one that really stuck out to me is Genoa if you're going from if you're going from China and you're trying to get into the Mediterranean right at the other end of the Suez Canal, essentially, now you have to go completely around and into the Mediterranean from the Straits of Gibraltar, and it's a 15 days additional, but the bigger part is it's 57% longer.
Right. So fuel costs now. So that also increases everything on that ship again, fuel, food, crews being out longer. So that creates a higher cost of operation for that boat.
Yep.
Which gets passed to the consumer.
Yeah, and think how long it takes for that boat to get back to China to fill up again, though. That's the other problem.
Mm-hmm.
Fortunately, I think that's where some of the numbers are going to level out a little bit, is the amount of ships under construction worldwide right now are huge. So there's going to be a lot of ships coming online in 2024 and 2025.
Good.
And that's a reaction to the COVID freight issue. But fortunately, I think it's going to help this not being as bad as it could have been.
So if you don't know, I'm just going to touch on this really, really quick. So we had this COVID freight bubble. So I can speak for the United States, and I think it was very similar globally. But what we had a bunch of ships that were basically just told to stop offshore, and they were out there for a very long time. And we were trying to figure out what was going on. And excuse me, I know for like the Port of Los Angeles, they were out there. I mean, we had ships out there for like, I think 90 to 120 days before they were able to come on. But what happened is we had this almost like a freight crash, if you will. I don't know if that's a correct term, but that's what I'm going to use. So we had like this massive flow of just freight that was going, and then all of a sudden it just stopped. It was like the numbers, I mean, especially for me in logistics and trucking, like we saw that pretty quick. But then very quickly after that, it was like everything got released at one time. So we had this massive wave of freight that was coming in, and then everybody was needing their freight. Especially when that happened, it was right at the very infant stages of the Christmas rush. So it was like everybody's orders were just going crazy, and then the rates skyrocketed. Like we were seeing 100% increase on rates going from LA to the East Coast, and we were seeing like traditional rates going from LA to the East Coast, whatever those would be, say they're $5,000-6,000. We were seeing $5,000-6,000 to the Pacific Northwest. We were seeing $5,000-6,000 to Texas. We were seeing, 12, 13, 14,000 from LA going to the East Coast. Right. So we had this massive just boom. And then now things have really leveled out. And now in my industry it's not good right now.
Yeah, that's why I think this is so scary, is because I think we were just getting back to probably a new normal.
Yeah.
And then I think this is just starting.
I do too.
To kind of talk about the Houthis and where they started out with what they were doing, they were essentially showing support for Hamas. And so originally they were just shooting ships that they had a port call in a month or two in Israel, or they were Israeli owned. But that quickly escalated, and now they're shooting pretty much indiscriminately.
Right.
They've shot at Indian ships, and they've shot at U.S. ships, and they've shot at French ships. They're all over the place now. Ships have a thing called AIS, and it's essentially a tracker that with a credit card and probably a $20 a month subscription, you can pull it up and you could track a ship, and you could see when it's moving and where it's headed and what its course and speed is. And so then you would think, well, just turn that off when you get over there.
Right.
But they're doing that, and they're still getting hit, because now there are spy ships in the area that are able to report, oh, there's a Maersk ship, and generally those are, U.S. or Western Europe. So, and somehow that gets back as a target, and then they attack it.
Right. So you're talking about that system that tracks the ships and you can see all its motion. Did you happen to do that once upon a time when you bought a brand new BMW 1250 GSA?
I did, yeah.
You're tracking, you found out the container and tracked that bad boy.
I literally had alerts like, oh, the ship got underway, because it was, when you're talking about the delays, the ship that was coming from Germany stopped off the coast of New York and spent 11 days out there just waiting for its turn to pull into port.
That'll drive you
I'm
crazy.
waiting for my bike. It's middle of the summer and I want it now. In fact, literally when it showed up at the dealer, I called them within an hour and I said, hey, my bike's there. And he says it is.
Yes, it is. I've been tracking this thing.
It's out back. Trust me, you signed for it.
Yeah.
Now I'm coming this afternoon to pick it up.
Get that thing out of the box. I'll be right there.
Right.
Dude, when you were telling me that, man, that is hilarious. And hopefully some other people are laughing at that right now too.
Yeah.
That is freaking awesome.
But now on the AIS, they're starting to put, because you can kind of put like Chinese crew, or there's a place for a narrative, and they're starting to put things like that. And I think that's kind of an interesting piece of this is certain countries' freight is still moving through completely unimpeded.
Right.
The
quote unquote ally freight.
No, the freight that's making it through. So we're over there protecting the
Not our ally, kind of the bad guy.
Right.
Yeah, that's what I meant.
Right. Russia, China, and Iranian oil freight, they're all moving through without issue.
Yep.
And yet we have 5 destroyers there, 5 or 6. Great Britain has 1 destroyer. France has 1 frigate. India has 1 or 2 ships. China has a ship over there, but it's been in port most of the time, so it's really not actively working to protect commerce.
Right.
And that's it. And it kind of makes you wonder who should be over there protecting all this stuff. You know, that if these ships don't make it to Europe, or if they continue their current path of, like, let's see, let's look at the cost of a container. So last fall, if it cost $1,500 to ship a container from China to Northern Europe, so like Rotterdam, $1,500 last fall, it's $4,500 now. Well, the shipping companies aren't paying that. They're passing it on to you and me.
Right.
Or the Europeans.
Mm-hmm.
And yet those navies aren't down there as actively promoting open sea lanes as they should be, in my opinion.
No, I agree with that opinion.
The EU is heading there, but kind of a day late and a dollar short.
Right. Heading there, they should be there.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. So with that, now that we kind of talked about kind of what's going on over there, and this is really a Cliff Note version, because there is so much more going on, geopolitically, politically, and all that. And like you said before, I don't want to get into a political pissing match or an argument of some sort. I don't think that's necessary. I think the facts here are really what is 100% what we're talking about. Yeah. And if you want to fact check us, we both did our homework. We have a source guide that will be in the description, and you can go see the articles and the videos and everything that we've read to prepare for this. It's all down there. And some of that, obviously, with anybody, I mean, we are people. We go through and we read and we construct our own opinion based on the facts that we just read.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we can be talking facts and have one opinion, and the other person could be having the same facts with a different opinion. But
yeah, and I think the show notes, though, are really important. I think, like you said, it being Cliff Notes, this is really, we're just touching the tip of the iceberg. Yeah. And really, I want to encourage people to become more educated on this, because if you look at anything from CNN, Fox News, Headline News, whatever your major news outlet is, this is anything related to the Red Sea is 12th, 15th on the list of whatever today's news is. Yet this is going to impact every single one of us the next time we go to the grocery store or Target or Walmart or the mall or Amazon, for that matter.
Yeah.
We're all going to pay for this. And it's going to be too late by the time that happens.
Yeah, I think we're going to be seeing that 10 Well, depending on what article you read, it's anywhere from 10 to about 21, 22% increase is what we can, as consumers, foresee for price increases. And that, I mean, that goes from the gas station to loaf of bread to whatever, because it doesn't matter. The grocery stores start raising their prices, are going to raise it on everything, essentially, right? So here's the very cliff note of the Red Sea. Now we move over to the Panama Canal. We touched on that already. If you don't know, the Panama Canal is actually under a drought right now. They're calling it a severe crisis. And I just read one of the articles down below. They are looking at about 8 to 10 months more from today. The latest article that I found, another 8 to 10 months of this being at drought stage. And so what they're doing is, I think you probably have some numbers on it, but they're either having to go around the Horn of Africa and coming up to go around that, which, what is that, another 10 or 15 days on top of that?
Well, they're going around South America.
Yeah.
And that's even a longer transit.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know I read 10 or 15 days, but I want to say that was in one way, and then it's got to loop up. So essentially a month.
Yeah.
A month longer to do that.
Yeah, and at certain times of the year, the water down there, that ocean, the Southern Ocean, is not conducive to normal freight shipments. I mean, that's why the Panama Canal was built over 100 years ago.
Right. Well, the Drake Passage, you know, that's, I don't know if anybody's seen any of those videos, but man, that is legit down there. Some massive waves. Yep. And that is right at the tip of South America to the peninsula of Antarctica. That just pulls some amazing weather and some incredible seas going through there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So one thing that we're starting to look at, with the Panama Canal coming across, I got to find my cursor. Got to figure out what screen I'm on. Here we are. Found it. But going over, bringing that into the United States. So this is a part where I have to take knowledge of my industry, some potential things that are coming down the turnpike, a driver shortage that's going on. It really depends on the numbers you want to look at. And it, you know, in the trucking industry, we have the Fox News and CNN that goes on, right? So a lot of the trucking things that I like to go and read and keep up to date is off a website called FreightWaves, freightwaves.com. They are, in all the years I've been doing this, over a couple decades, they have always, since they've been around, have been the kind of, for me, the go-to factual place. It's kind of no BS. You know, it's not, you know, there's no really agenda based to it. It's like, here's the facts, create your own deal, right? So I go through that. But then we also have like the OOIDA, the Owner Operator Independent Drivers Association. They do a lot of fantastic things in this industry, but they also get very political on a lot of good things and rally within Washington to kind of create a fair place, because you have the big boys out there. Your Swift and Knights. Well, Swift and Knight are the same anymore, but like JB Hunts and, you know, the big mega carriers are out there. That kind of keeps them in check so they don't get their way all the time. But there are some times where I'm like, oh man, you guys are way off base, right? So you got to really kind of be weary of those kind of articles. But kind of what I'm getting at is, so right now we're already in a strained supply chain. You mix that with some of the driver shortage and the potential lack of freight that's coming in, right? So it's almost like a tsunami, right? So everything's going to kind of fade out before it comes in again, and we don't know when it's going to come back in. So what we're seeing right now is we're seeing a really difficult time in the trucking market. it really depends on the day and the number, the fuel prices, because every little thing actually matters to the bottom line and the cost of operation for a trucking company. And literally everything you buy here in the United States comes from a truck, one way or another, right? So you go to the grocery store, it all came from a truck. You go to Home Depot, it all came from a truck. You know, you go step inside your house, all the material came from a truck, right? So when we start talking about freight and the lack of freight that's coming in with the current situation and the potential backflow of this about to happen, we can see a lot of, and I'm not trying to be like conspiracy theorists and scare people, but really we could find ourselves in a very bad spot very, very quickly. We can find ourselves in an economic downfall, kind of where we are. You know, I think numbers are easy to skew to make it say we're not in a recession. That's an opinion I'm going to keep to myself. But, you know, there's a lot of ways to skew the numbers. But I think where we are right now with an economy, where we are right now with trucking, and what's going on in the Panama Canal and the Red Sea and everything is really going to start fluctuating us, I would say, in the next couple months is really when I don't think we're, like you said, I don't think we're seeing it yet, but we're about to.
Right.
And it's going to be too late once we notice it. Right. So that's why I think this is a good discussion to have, because I think a lot of people, they might say, oh, we got ships in the Red Sea and we're shooting missiles back and forth, but they're not really. Why?
Well, or is it effective?
Right.
I mean, just because we have the world's largest Navy doesn't mean that slapping down 100 drones and missiles at container ships is going to solve the container problem.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I think, I don't know, I just want to bring awareness to it and just really want to just keep up to date. Or for me, like learning more about the shipping. You and I started talking about shipping, what, 2 months ago? Something like that. And then
because I was pretty fascinated with some of the data, and I figured you would be too, being in the industry, kind of at the other end of the same chain.
Well, I think you're a big part of, you know, the rebrand of the podcast, but also this particular podcast, you know, because I started seeing a lot of things that were going on. And then you started sending me videos, and I was over at your house and you're like, hey, watch this. You know, so we watched another video over there, and my mind starts going. Like, I'm watching this and getting all this information, and my mind is just like questions. You know, what if this happens, and what if that happens, but why would that happen, and so on and so on. And that's, I mean, we talked about doing this broadcast, 2 weeks ago, and then we were both like, well, we could do it off the cuff. But I was like, no, let's do some more homework. You know, get it all lined up to be like this. So, what else you got over there, man? I see you got papers for days.
Yeah. Well, and one of the things back on the Red Sea side that I think I've never read in an article, because the articles are very kind of first person, what happened yesterday. Yeah. But you're looking at the whole stability of the region. So each ship on average that passes through the Suez Canal pays $500,000. Egypt's government gets almost $10 billion a year through Suez tolls. Their total government budget was $97 billion last year. So it's literally 10% of their entire government budget comes from tolls. Right now, if you're taking container ships, well, and you can look at it from the point of shipping or the point of gross tonnage. But gross tonnage is down probably 60%. And so if you take that 10 billion and their tolls and you drop Egypt's tolls to 3 or 4 billion next year, you could literally destabilize that government. And we've seen in the past what happens when you destabilize Egypt.
Yeah.
You know, what would happen to the southern border of Israel or Libya? It's just, there's so many more things that this one little group that's just kind of taking pot. I mean, it's like a schoolyard bully that's messing around with a few ships down there in the Red Sea. But the problem is the rest of the world doesn't want to deal with it. So they're like, okay, well, let's move our ships somewhere else.
Right.
And there's multiple consequences to that. There's you and me paying for it, but we could literally cause instability in that entire region.
Right. And like you just said, I mean, the trickle down effect of an Egypt, like you were just saying, I mean, what would that do to the surrounding countries? And like you were saying, Israel and Egypt butt up with one another. And then everything that's going on over there, which is a completely different conversation. But I mean, that whole area is just out of control at the moment, in my opinion. Yeah. I mean, and if you destabilize one, man, it just boils the water in the other.
Right. Yeah, and that's just it. Like having everybody kind of at a status quo is a good thing.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Because as soon as you move one out, then the rest of everybody's fighting for that spot, no matter who it is, good or bad.
Yeah. And history's shown that time and time again, Yeah. And again, back to my original, it's so sad that it's one book versus another book. It's just like, oh my Lord. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And then, on the Panama Canal side, when the original Panama Canal was built, it was actually attempted by a Frenchman who built the Suez.
I did not know that. Yeah. Okay.
And his theories didn't work out. And the U.S. came in with a different theory, and that is what we have today, which is the 3-lock system, raises ships about 25 meters on each side into a lake. They transit across and out the other side. By the way, I've gone through the Panama Canal twice. It's an amazing piece of history, and it's amazing to see it in operation.
That's pretty cool.
But it's all fed by the fresh water. And that lake that feeds both of those sets of locks also is the primary drinking water for the entire country.
I didn't even know that part.
Yeah, so they've got all their entire country's economic viability, Panama Canal.
Yeah.
And their survivability, drinking water, is the same system.
When did we're going off topic for a second, so hold on, kids. Here we go for a ride. Let's see if we can get Sean some knowledge here, and not to put you on the spot, but when did the United States give back? Would it be a full authority of the Panama Canal?
Yeah, it started down that path with Jimmy Carter.
Okay, so 70s,
and I think it was George Bush 1 that did the final turnover.
Okay, so
because so the history is, what was it? I don't remember exactly. I think it was 1909 or something when it was opened, but the U.S. built it, and we owned and operated that and I think it was a 30-mile swath either side. We had a U.S. Navy base on the Pacific side. We had a fairly large U.S. Air Force base just a few miles down the road. I've been to both, and all that has been turned over to the country of Panama. We don't control any of that anymore. They reap all the revenue from the canal.
Yeah.
And it's theirs. It's theirs to kind of sink or swim, pass or fail at this point.
Sink or swim. And then, again, I'm just spitballing here. There's also, what, is it China that's attempting to build another one south of it somewhere?
Actually, it's Belarus. And I think is trying to fund one through Costa Rica.
Oh, okay.
300 kilometers is what they're looking at. And originally, the interesting part of that is the area that they're looking at doing that in, the U.S. actually surveyed some of that before we built the existing Panama Canal. Mm-hmm. So like it was on the table over 100 years ago, that same alternative route. And then, but even more so than that, and you may be more versed in this, I just read recently that Mexico is currently constructing, like it's in the process, and it's not really a canal, but it's kind of considered like a freight canal. The ships will pull up on one side, it all goes by rail to the other side, right, and then offloads. And so it's an entire system of rail and ports that can intermodal transport either side without having to actually send the ship through the country.
Yeah, that seems like a massive operation, because I would be very curious to know how much one of these super container ships would, how many trains it would take
Right.
for one ship.
And I don't know that answer. I actually thought about
Yeah.
that earlier today. Well, and on the Panama Canal side, like right now, they're facing, well, I have the stats up here. A year ago, the average, the 7-day average was 35 ships of a particular type. I think I'm looking at container ships right now, and they're down to 14.
Mm-hmm.
But the key that again is missed in many of the articles that are saying 35 down to 15. So they're cut in half, let's just say. But they're also having to reduce their draft by 40%.
Oh, wow.
So if you have a ship that can hold 15,000 containers, it's by weight, but you could suggest that 6,500, 7,000 containers have to come off that ship before it can even go through.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's actually one of the things. They were dredging the canal there for a little while. And I know that Houston was actually dredging outside, and they were getting ready to take on, as far as I understood, anyways, I need to preface that. But as far as I understood, Houston was getting ready to do some dredging and take on more of the, I don't even know if that's the correct term, the super container ships, but they're a lot bigger than what they have been, and they were on track at one point to be probably one of the biggest ports in the world, at that point. But that seems to just, because I used to go down there all the time, and I used to see just dredging and all this going on. I don't see that anymore.
No, and there's a big discussion right now about U.S. infrastructure for our ports, and Rotterdam and Shanghai and several of the major ports, Genoa. The size of container ships that they can take, they have some super max containers that can go up to. So a TEU is a 20-foot container, even though the majority of the containers are the 40 foots.
Yeah.
But the ships are all graded on how many TEUs can they hold, even though they're usually holding. So if it's 20,000 TEUs, you could put 10,000 40-foot containers, and that's normally what you'd see on a tractor trailer going down the road.
Well, one,
right?
Yeah, not 10,000.
Right. But so now that you understand those numbers, like Rotterdam and those, they can take some of these max cargo ships that'll hold up to 24,000 TEUs, and the Panama Canal can only, I think the largest one, they call them Panamax. They're literally made for their new lane at the canal.
Mm-hmm.
And depending on the ship's configuration, 14 to 16,000 TEUs. And that's really what Houston, I think it's Savannah, even Norfolk and
Jacksonville
and New York,
Tampa
can handle. They can't handle. No, I don't think any of those ports can handle these 24,000 TEU ships.
Yeah, I must have had some bad information, because that is substantially different. Yeah, absolutely. See,
And it just shows we need to build our infrastructure. But look, the other part of that discussion is I think 2% of the major freight ships are actually U.S. flagged. All these ships are foreign flagged ships.
Yeah,
with generally foreign flagged merchant mariners as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So let's kind of loop back around to the Red Sea again. So we kind of talked about it a little bit. We were talking about there's a hazard pay for these guys to be going over there, right? So I don't know if you're prepared to talk about that or not, but I know that kind of what we were saying, some of these guys may not be getting that hazard pay, which I'm not sure what it is, but in that video we watched, it sure seemed like it was significant.
Yeah. So, and I'm familiar with hazard pay in the military. When you get into certain zones, you get, extra $200, $300, $400 into your paycheck a month. And, they do the same thing for merchant mariners when they get into essentially a war zone. If the shipping company wants to go through there, generally they will pay that perk to ensure that they have a full crew. And interestingly enough, I read an article recently where some of the U.S. unions for merchant mariners weren't paying those hazard duty pay rates for their mariners going through the Bab el Mandab straight into the Red Sea. Or they were kind of fighting it, and I'm not sure that's right word. They just hadn't agreed to pay it yet, I think was how they would probably paraphrase it.
Oh, yeah, that's very political of you, Sean. Yes. Well, I think those guys need to be getting paid for sure, whatever it is. You know, there was actually, I really forgot. We're going motorcycle for a second, but man, he's kind of disappeared. He was a motorcycle rider from Greece, had a YouTube channel, did some cool stuff, rode around that whole area, did some stuff, I believe, around Nepal maybe. But I remember he was like, hey, I'm taking off. You know, and he was getting on a big, I think it was like an oil tanker, and he was like in the engine room, and he was just like, yeah, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. And he has disappeared. I have no idea what happened, you know, but he was like, he made the announcement that he was gone for 3 months. So see you guys in 3 months. And it was just gone. So sometimes when I think about, you know, the shipping and tankers and stuff, I'm like, oh, I wonder what happened to that guy.
Well, and it's amazing. I mean, thanks to YouTube, there's a few really good channels where people sign on as, you know, third mate, second mate on a ship, and they'll give you a 20-minute day in the life of being out on a merchant ship, and it's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
You know, and I think I mentioned it earlier, and I want to touch on it while we have the opportunity. One of the things that we're realizing now with merchant ships in these areas is they can't communicate with the Navy ships. So they're not running a convoy per se, but they need to be able to be warned by the Navy ship, hey, 30 seconds ago, they just fired 4 missiles at you. Right?
Yeah.
And how do you do that?
You just got to get on the comms, man.
Well, do you want to just use bridge to bridge so the Houthis also know what you're talking about?
Yeah, that's right.
Right.
Yeah, you don't want to do that.
Or do you pick up a cell phone, but oops, we're 18 miles offshore. I've got 1 bar. I can't hear you now.
Right. Or sat phones.
And that's what it's coming down to. But on the flip side, the Navy ship has all these communication systems.
Right.
And they're not really set up with a call center to take a SATCOM call. Right.
Welcome to the USS whatever.
So you see
your call.
Right. You see the quandary. And I think what we're going to see, because there was a Senate hearing just last week, and they interviewed the vice president of Maersk and MSC, Mediterranean Shipping Corporation. And the Mediterranean Shipping Corporation person specifically spoke about the need for better communication between the Navy and our merchant vessels.
Right.
We need secure communications. Does that mean when they're in that 5-6 day transit zone that we put 3 or 4 military personnel on there with secure comms? I don't know exactly what that means yet.
Sure.
But those are the kind of type things that have been floated to help their security.
Well, I think, you know, all the guys that work in, you know, in communications, I think they would probably be, I'll do that. I'll go on another ship and I'll, you know, talk back and forth. And it depends on, I mean, there's a lot of different smaller systems that you can use, obviously, you know. Like, I mean, look at the ground guys, you know, talking.
Oh, yeah, we've got the technology, and I know that Marines in particular have been trained for this role. But I think you know, and I said it offline beforehand, there's a military solution that may not solve it. There's an economic solution that may not solve it. And there's a political solution that may not solve it.
Right.
And so at what point do you know, just because you could put a contingent of 4 or 5 Marines on every U.S. flagged vessel, through there.
Get some water there, kid. But yeah.
You know, if you put Marines on U.S. flagged vessels, what I say earlier, it's only 2% of the world's freighters are U.S. flagged.
Right.
So you're still not solving the problem.
No, you're really not. But, you know, I'm going to say no, you're not with one breath, but, you know, the other side of my mouth, I'm like, absolutely put those guys on.
Right.
You know? Yeah. 100%. That should be an interesting dynamic with a couple Marines on board.
Well, the Marines are going to like the living quarters a lot better.
Oh yeah, probably. So I actually have some stuff kind of just brought up. So we have a container lead time to the U.S. ports coming through the Panama Canal. Now this is a little bit of older data, so I think a lot of it is going to be probably on the higher side. So coming out of the Panama Canal, going to Houston, for example, your average time is looking, and I'm having a hard time finding where it starts. So I'm going to assume this is probably coming out of China. Trying to read and keep the thing going at the same time.
Well, and while you're looking at that, I can kind of ad-lib a little bit that, in general, those ships, say they're coming across the Pacific from Shanghai, they're going to stop in LA and drop off some cargo. They may stop again in Mexico and drop off some cargo and take on cargo. And then they're going to go through the Panama and they're going to pull up to, Galveston or Houston, over to Savannah and to New York. It's kind of like the bus route or the mail route. They don't just go Shanghai to New York and that's it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of like in the trucking. You can have one pick, 2 drops, for example.
Exactly.
Or one pick, 3 drops, whatever it is. Sometimes you have like 4 picks and 1 drop. So,
and I think that's where some of those union issues that have come up at the port of LA last year and the year before, it diverted ships through the Panama Canal to the East Coast. Well, now the East Coast, I think New York is getting ready to have some union negotiations.
Right.
And you brought up, I think, a potential trucking strike in Mexico.
Well, I did bring that up a couple days ago. However, preparing for this today, they actually resolved.
Oh, good.
The government came and stepped in and trying to resolve. So just a quick touch on that. They were, Mexico's kind of, it's stereotypical, right? It's a little bit of lawless down there at times. And so they were having a massive, safety issue going on with cargo theft, right? So whether you're bebopping down the road and get stopped, or maybe you're at a truck stop for the night and resting, and then you wake up and, people have been in your trailer and took a bunch of stuff, Generally, it is down there, from what I've read, has been more of the kind of violent side of things. It's been more like truck jackings, either kidnapping the driver or just throwing them out. Best case scenario, a lot of executions have actually happened with that. I don't know backstory.
Wouldn't that be worst case scenario?
Yeah, sorry. Worst case scenario. Jesus. Worst case scenario. But yeah, they've been taking dudes out, and I don't know. I mean, I don't know who's doing it. I don't know what those situations are where guys have been, essentially executed. But the government it's stepped in, the Mexican government. And so as of right now, again, February 13th, 2024, it doesn't look like that's going to happen. Looks like some good traction has been made to prevent that. Now, if that did happen, we would have had a whole nother topic of conversation going on, because there's a lot of trade and trucking going back and forth, So I'm glad that didn't happen.
Yeah, I think, with NAFTA and the free trade between the Mexican border and the Canadian border, anything that happens in one of those two countries could significantly impact us.
Exactly. So basically, this is an article. This is off CNBC, so take it for what it's worth. But this actually, it just talks about the shipping that's been going through there, and this is towards the beginning of the drought. I think the numbers are a little bit about the same. It talks about 40 to 50% of capacity is what it's running at right now. They took down about 14 ships. Yeah, so about 28 ships a month less, which is pretty massive if you really think about those ships coming through there. And so they're talking some transport time, some lead times going around. And again, Sean was going, I was trying to read a little bit more, kind of free-flowing on this article here, just kind of bringing it up. But I'm not sure exactly where it started, but it looks like the maximum time to Houston is about probably 80 days. So this goes in 15-day increments on this graph. So somewhere around the lead time to Houston is somewhere around 80 days, 81 days. If we did the same time to Charleston, North Carolina? Yeah.
South Carolina.
South Carolina. There we go. Oh, yeah. Duh. That is a beautiful drive from Savannah to Charleston. Oh, my gosh. It is stunning. Anyways, there's a squirrel moment for you. Looks like 77 days over there.
Well, let's talk about the freight costs. So that container ship, or excuse me, that container used to cost $2,400, and right now it's at $6,800.
Holy jeez, dude, that's like
So East Asia to the U.S. West Coast, $1,500 is now $5,000, and East Asia to the U.S. East Coast, $2,400 last fall, $6,800 right now.
That's per container.
That's per container.
Man,
So look at your percentages.
Right.
200-300%.
Yeah. I mean, if you're looking at that just right there, and that goes back to the economics, right? I mean, that gets pushed right back onto the consumer.
Oh yeah, and that's why in general the stock prices of many of these shipping companies is up. They're making money.
Oh yeah.
This is kind of good for them.
Oh yeah, they're loving it.
They'll testify before Congress that they're having a real bad time, but at the end of the day, their stockholders are loving it.
Yeah, dude, that's insane. It looks like a lead time going over to New York is 94 days.
Wow.
That's a long time. That is a long time.
Yeah, and I think what you're going to see there is some adaptation, right? Are they going to pull into Seattle, into the Tacoma port, even Port of Portland, LA, Long Beach, as an alternative?
Yeah, I know during COVID, a lot of the shipping that was coming in to LA was diverted to Tacoma and Vancouver, BC, up in Canadian land. So, I mean, people just got to do what the company's got to do what they got to do to get that freight off, right? And then you run into the NAFTA, all of that. So then we're able to trade that stuff or move that stuff around through the three countries here in North America. But
yeah, and I think the Panama Canal Authority, it sounds like they have a plan in place to what's the word I'm looking for, to adapt to the low water issue, but it's not all implemented yet. And there's some pushback to it. They built a second set of locks in 2016 for much larger ships. And that one on paper was supposed to recycle 70% of the water. In reality, it's recycling 50 to 60% of the water, which is still better than the original locks. The original locks, you're dumping the entire lock out to the ocean because you can't bring that brackish water back in to a freshwater lake that then feeds the country.
Right.
And so they're looking at building another lake nearby and then running a tunnel tube of water into Gatun Lake. But, right now everybody's hurting because they're having to lower everything. But once they get all that infrastructure in place, they could probably be a little bit environmental proof for a while.
Yeah. And then you kind of look at that region. So you've got essentially the entire Panamanian economics based on the canal. And when that fails, that country's kind of in a little bit of chaos at the moment. And then so is that whole area. So that goes back to what we were talking about with Egypt. You start having troubles with one and it just escalates into something so much more.
Well, it is. And I remember one time when I was down there, I rented a car and several of the guys that worked with me, we all went into Panama City together, and we ended up into kind of this old town district, and we saw a guy from our ship standing on the street corner, and he walked over to our car and said, "You guys need to get out of here."
Oh, no kidding.
Because he was Panamanian. And
okay. So he was like at home.
He was totally home, but he saw us just regular old Americans and said, "You guys, no, get out of here." We're like, I had no idea.
We just turned left.
Bad neighborhood, good neighborhood. I didn't know. But it goes back to when the U.S. invasion of Panama.
Right.
It was really heavy in that little district, and they were not necessarily friendly to us. And, that was 20 years ago. I have no idea what it's like today, but I just remember kind of those experiences. And it was completely counter to my other experience, which was like another time in Panama. We grabbed our mountain bikes, brought them down off the ship, and went just riding around the countryside to the north of the canal, and it was beautiful and really neat.
Yeah, there's this motorcycle person that you don't like named Itchy Boots, and she has actually a couple episodes in Panama that were pretty cool. Apparently she did some work at the canal for a while, and so she kind of was talking about the history of it and stuff. I thought it was pretty cool.
Yeah, I'm always
I should have made you watch
that.
I should have made you watch that for show prep.
Well, now I'm curious. I'll go watch it anyway.
Yeah. Sean, you have to watch this. Dang it. Yeah, dude, for real. So, I mean, with everything kind of going on, I mean, the economic impact is kind of up in the air. I really strongly feel like we're in this a little bit of a belly rub, right? At least here at the United States. I can't speak for any other country, but I feel like we're just kind of trying to get a little bit of a belly rub. We're trying to have our belly rub like, hey, we are not in a recession. And whether you believe we are or if you believe we aren't, they're rubbing our belly, telling us. But I also firsthand, I mean, I had 2023 for my company was by far the worst that it's ever been. There were, I mean, I went backwards month after month after month, and just trying to figure it out and do things different. It doesn't help where we live here in the Pacific Northwest. It's a bit of the freight void of the world, I jokingly call it. We take more than we ship, essentially. So sometimes getting home, you can get home, but getting out sometimes can be very difficult. Now, I need to also preface this with getting out sometimes you can get out, but it's your cost per mile is terrible. They're essentially like, you pay me to move my freight kind of stuff because it's so bad. So I don't haul that stuff. It's better to sit at home and not pay somebody else to move to another spot. But sometimes maybe it's better just to freaking go somewhere else and get that freight on so you can get moving again.
Yeah, that's what I've learned about you is you always comment, it's hard to get out of here or get home. But once I get kind of down into California, Texas, just basically anywhere else other than the Northwest, then you can kind of pick job to job to job and move around.
The customer base is so much more. There's just more moving in that part of the country, the head haul places. And then I like to watch the spot market. I'm so surprised at owner-operators who don't understand the spot market. And the spot market changes, and basically the spot market, just layman's terms, is what area is popping right now that has more freight than trucks. And so the prices change, right? You got more freight, you don't have the trucks, so now your rates go up. Right? And then everybody will go, oh, things are looking really good over here. So it's like everybody flies over there, and now there's more trucks and freight. Everything goes down, spot market moves.
Yeah, and shipping's the same way. They have a spot market, and probably 70% of the ocean freight is on a contractual kind of quoted price, and then the other 30% is spot market. Yeah.
Trucking, I don't know what the rate is. I mean, there's millions and millions and millions of customers out there, right? So I don't know what the exact numbers are for contract rate versus, one-offs, right? Or a company that just whatever. I'll just ship with whoever's cheapest at that day, right? So probably good place to kind of wrap this one up.
Sure. Let me bring up one more topic, a little small one that was kind of new for me until I really started following this topic.
Sounds good.
Is the U.S. government pays $500 $100,000 per ship to about 60 merchant vessels a year. And that payment is to ensure that those ships remain as a U.S. flagged vessel with U.S. flagged crew. So they are not direct gray Navy support ships. They are, well, the primary one is Maersk, but Maersk is out of Northern Europe, but there's Maersk Lines Limited out of the U.S., and those particular ships are U.S. flagged because we're essentially subsidizing those ships, and with contractual obligations. We need them available. We need them on these particular routes, and we kind of stipulate a few things. And I thought that was kind of an interesting thing that I don't think a lot of people realize, that's going on behind the scenes. And some of the ships that were being shot at in the Red Sea were those ships. Unfortunately, the Navy protected them. Yeah. And who knows what's on those ships, but publicly it was discussed that there was military cargo and humanitarian aid.
Right, yeah.
It was always the two that was mentioned.
Yep.
But those ships remain under U.S. flag with U.S. crews.
So did I hear you right? They pay them $500K a year just to keep that. So, I mean, your bottom line starts at $500,000.
Right.
Yeah. So are those more like, is that what's moving our weapons around? Is that...
Well, we have an entire military sea lift command.
Right.
Of pre-positioned ships literally around the world, not just around the U.S., that are massive cargo ships. And they're gray, just like a Navy ship. They have red, white, and blue on the funnel. And there are various conditions in state of readiness. So some have to be able to be ready to sail in 5 days. Other ones, maybe 30 days. And so that dictates the condition of the engineering plant and the crews that can be pulled in to operate the vessel. Many of them are ro-ros, which are roll-on, roll-off ships, massive ramps down the back. You could literally drive a tank or an 18-wheeler on the ship. So we have those in times of war or conflict, but this is kind of the next step down, where they're not actually owned by the U.S. government or operated by the U.S. government, but we're kind of chartering them or contractually holding them so we could put maybe, who knows, 100 containers out of its cargo from the U.S. government.
Sure.
Yeah. Those numbers are not available.
100 containers of humanitarian needs.
Right.
Yeah. Right. Well, I think they did something too, with kind of another podcast, but, the whole Hamas-Israel conflict going on, that there was a lot of those protests. And it's really hard for me to, there's so much crazy kind of BS mixed in with the real stuff, right? And you got to watch your social media, people. Holy moly, can't believe everything, And I remember seeing something about up in Tacoma that they were trying to block one of the ships that was getting ready to leave, and
Cape Orlando.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it ended up going over to the Mediterranean.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's like...
And that was one of those military Sea Lift Command ships. It was a pre-positioned ship, I think, in San Francisco Bay.
Okay.
And it moved up to Tacoma. Who knows what cargo was brought on board?
I don't know. I'd be willing to bet airplane stuff. Boeing.
Oh,
well,
I was actually thinking something out of McCord.
Yeah.
Fort Lewis.
Yeah, Fort Lewis, McCord.
So some of those ships literally will be activated annually, semi-annually, to move brigades, like an army brigade, back and forth from Germany. So it's more a matter of just bringing, what's been there for a few years home and bringing stuff over, not necessarily in conflict. But
I don't know if I'm right on this one. I know they're there. Is it the Fort Lewis is the third Ranger Battalion?
I don't know that answer.
Something like that. I don't know.
There's a lot of badasses up there.
Yeah, I know they got some. Well, I think they got berets and those guys up there. So yeah, that's pretty. I wouldn't want to know what was on that boat. Yeah, man. So, anything else, mister?
No,
'Cause
a great topic, and it's something I think we should all keep up with. And I think everybody listening, I encourage you to do your homework, read the down in the sources. There's a YouTube channel called What's Going On with Shipping.
Yep.
He's a doctorate of history at Columbia University. That doesn't sound right. Anyway,
Is that the Sal
Macagliano?
Yep.
But he literally is one of the foremost experts on U.S. trade by sea, basically, and he's a historian, extremely knowledgeable. He doesn't mix politics into his discussions, and has been a big source, or at least kind of cued me on to topics.
Well, that's the guy that you kind of just got my feet wet. With all this stuff too, and he's a fascinating. It's an up tempo, fast pace, 20 minutes.
Well, it's like you're in a lecture. You're in a college lecture.
Yeah, and it is so full of information. But he has his facts up there. He has other videos being played. I mean, this guy has it legit. So yeah. Again, yeah, we have the sources guide or the resource guide or whatever we're gonna call it down there. But all the links that we've got kind of prepared for will be down in the description below. This is the first the current view. This is the first episode of the current view that we're doing here on PODcakes, and I thought it was pretty rad. I wanted to thank you for taking your time and coming up here. And this is the first time we actually did a podcast together or a live together where we didn't have a beer.
Well, we had to stay on topic. I mean, there's so many facts.
I know. We had to really say, but now we can go downstairs and have one.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, there we go. But yeah, dude, I really appreciate your time, appreciate your knowledge, appreciate your friendship, and coming on. It means a lot to me. I hope a lot of people kind of maybe got their eyes open a little bit more what's going on and maybe got some of the facts. And like you said, encourage them to go and actually learn more about this and at least maybe keep an eye on it a little bit more. And then maybe if, some more developments happen or this ends, I don't know, we can come back on and chit chat about it. Like I said, we're trying to keep the politics out of it. Sometimes you have to take along the politics to help understand some of the geopolitics, you got to talk about. But I've got some other people that I've been talking to. We've got a couple more of these current views coming on, so some sticky conversations for sure. And I'm having a really hard time finding somebody for the other side who is not political based, not a propaganda based, who can just be neutral. And I've reached out to a couple people and I was just like, nope. Nope, absolutely not. So
well, the current view is kind of tricky at times.
No,
I can see it. And even this one, we could completely get political. I think we've done a good job of skirting that.
You and I have shared some looks. A couple of looks like,
wait, you were looking? Oh.
Yeah. What? We can go this way. We can go that way. It's really hard. And I don't care what people's political beliefs are, whether you're right or left. I don't care as long as it's common sense. I think both sides have. Wow, I'm going political. I think I think both right and left they have their factions, if you will, that are out of control.
Well, and I think if there's a takeaway from this, like I'm looking 5 years into the future, and 5 years behind. 5 years behind, there was a lot of discussion about global economy is really good, and I think that we gave up some North American jobs because of that mindset. And I think what this is reminding me is that those jobs closer to home are more valuable today than ever.
Yeah.
Because we wouldn't be worrying about either of these canals or freight or coming from another country or what is happening in the Middle East impacting what's on the shelf at my grocery store or Walmart or Amazon.
Yeah, I mean that's the truth, because literally, I mean, wherever it's being manufactured, it's got to get on a boat, it's got to get on a truck, and that globalization, trying to make that one world economy is Yeah, you're right. I mean, we would still have shipping going through these canals because there would be a smaller percentage, maybe a little less than half, but we'd still have it. But it wouldn't be such an economic impact. You know, it wouldn't have that kind of just driving force of, oh man, this can get bad real quick.
Right, and I think it's just a matter of being aware. I mean, there are times, absolutely, I'm going to buy something that, well, I know it's made in East Asia.
Yeah.
Because it's not made anywhere else, and I needed it. But on the other hand, if I'm going to go to a store and buy a couch, and there's 2 couches there, and they're the same price, and one's made, 30 miles from here, like the last time we bought a couch, I was absolutely biased to that one for good reason.
Well, that's a very good reason.
Yeah.
So you really do shop overseas a lot. You spend a lot of people's money.
Oh, I love it.
And so, I mean, buying the GS right from Germany,
Well, trust me, I have rode the American-made bike prior to that and wasn't as impressed.
Well,
not mentioning names.
we're not mentioning names, but I don't know. I ride the Honda Africa Twin.
Yeah.
And
it was overseas.
yeah, dude, that bike is phenomenal.
Yep.
They got along well this weekend on our yurt adventure. And since I said that, yeah, if you're into the YouTube channel, the Motorcycles and Pancakes, I'm currently editing Sean's and I excursion last week, and there was a little bit of drama on there, but you're gonna have to just subscribe, like, and share. And
it's always great to escape in the winter down the Oregon coast. That's all I'll say.
it was a beautiful weekend. It absolutely was. All right, man. Well, with that, you got to go home and make some dinner, and
so I guess we could just keep going.
I know. Yeah, we totally
I'm
could.
gonna make dinner.
We totally could, man. Yeah, dude, it is all good. It's, yeah. Again, man, thanks for coming on. I appreciate you. And until the next time,